Well, I woke up with a crazy dream, my heart beating fast. I couldn't go back to sleep, so I thought, yeah, might as well get up and have a cup of coffee. I was sitting here thinking about that crazy dream, and it reminded me of somebody I knew when I was young that grew up in our neighborhood. It's a little story I'll tell you. It kind of starts off strangely, and me and a couple of my other buddies, we was out messing around in this big field, and it was kind of a field that abutted the back of our little housing development. It was a three block wide and probably about 4 blocks long, kind of a neighborhood. Anyway, there was a big field back behind it that abutted it, and we used to hunt out there, deer and small game, whatever, with our 22s and just plink around mostly. Anyway, we came upon this wooden box about, I guess it was the size of a bread box or something, and it had a little lock on it. Well, we were, like a treasure chest or something to us yahoo kids. We were probably, 14 or whatever back in those days, maybe 15. And so we shot the lock off, and inside were these dime store novel porn books. So we each kind of went over to our little secret hideout, which was kind of a grove of yopons and stuff there, and I think there was a few oak trees in it, and we kind of climbed up in this one oak tree where we would sit up in there. And anyway, we kind of took turns reading out of some of the stories out of these crazy porn books. And anyway, turns out that box belonged to this kid that was 2 years behind us in school. His name was James Coburn. And anyway, I remember playing with them buddies of mine out in front of his house one time. I don't know what we were doing, just messing around out there. And James and a couple of his, brothers and sisters or whatever were out playing in front of the house there. And anyway, they were riding bikes up and down the street, and there was a stick laying there in the yard. I think it's about, 14 inches long, maybe a foot. 3/4 inch around. It had jagged ends on both ends where it had been broke. And I decided I was going to pick that stick up and just launch it up as high as I could up into the sky and let it fall on the road somewhere over there by them, just to kind of surprise them. And turns out that darn stick, when it came down, it hit James just right in the top of the head, pointed down, and the jagged end, well, it cut his scalp and made it start bleeding. Well, the impact of it didn't seem to bother him at all, but he put his hand up there, and when he pulled it down, well, he had blood on his fingers, and that freaked him out. He started screaming and just took off running, ran back up in his house. And I didn't mean to do it. It was an accident, but it was caused by me, and I'm sorry that I did it. But anyway, that's not really the story I wanted to tell. I guess I wish I had been a better friend to James. Everything's so cliquish back when you're in, junior high and high school or whatever. He was a couple of years behind us in school, so we didn't really associate that much. Anyway, when I got out of the Army and I got back, I had learned that James had gone over and they had built a big shopping mall with a bank there, and anyway, he decided he was going to rob that, so he took a pistol over there and I guess pointed it at the clerk and said, "Give me your money." And so he got a little bag of money, and the security guard or deputy sheriff there in Harris County, I guess I don't know if it was in the city or not, if it was a Houston cop or a Harris County cop, but anyway, he took the gun away from that security guard, and then he proceeded to come out of the bank and run across the Greens Point Road there, and then run back towards the housing development through this big field. And he was kind of a slight kid, probably, maybe 5'4" or something at the time, I would say. And so he was probably well concealed, I would think, for the most part, except his upper body and running through that grass. And anyway, that he didn't take the keys away from deputy sheriff, and so the sheriff ran out to his car and jumped in it and drove around the feeder side street and pulled out a carbine, and when he had a little better vantage point on him, he took a shot at James and ended up creasing him right across the forehead and knocked James out, knocked him unconscious, and that bullet traveled on and hit a big water tank there that was, I guess the water tank maybe that fed our neighborhood or fed some of the little stores, the shopping mall stores that had been built there alongside the road. Anyway, James was captured and put in prison for some time for doing that bank robbery. And later on, I'd gone to college, and when I got out of college, I was either home on vacation or whatever, and I guess some of the neighborhood kids had learned maybe that I was studying psychology and sociology or whatever. And anyway, James saw me outside one day, and he kind of motioned for me to come over, and so I went over and we kind of sat down in the yard there and just kind of visited, and he told me the story about the robbery, and then he told me about being in prison, and he kind of got real quiet and serious, and tears welled up in his eyes, and he told me that he had been raped in prison, and you know, I didn't know what to say about something like that. I wasn't a psychologist or anything, so I just, you know, I just kind of acknowledged it, and then, you know, told him I'd heard that kind of stuff was, you know, happened a lot in prison or whatever. And anyway, I don't remember a whole lot more about the conversation, but anyway, that's been quite a few years back. And anyway, we went on our separate ways, and so I didn't ever hear or see anything more of James for many, many a year. And I guess that was probably back in the maybe late 70s, early 80s. And then sometime in the 90s, I'm thinking, I don't remember for sure, mid-90s, I guess, I was reading in the newspaper, and I was at work, and just kind of browsing through the newspaper. I worked in a training office, so we had an opportunity to read a little bit of newspapers or whatever, and I saw James' picture in the paper, and I saw his name below the picture, and I started reading the article. It turns out it was a notice of his execution by the state of Texas. And so anyway, I read about it, and turns out James had invited, I think he was about 30, in his 20s or 30s maybe, I'm not sure exactly how old he was at that point, but he invited a older woman back over to his apartment, and I don't know if he wasn't working or what, but he decided that he would like to have relations with this woman, and apparently it didn't go well, and so she kind of rebuffed his advances, and he ended up getting a kitchen knife and stabbing this woman. And I don't know if that, you know, finished her off or what, but he ended up strangling her to death in the end. And I guess he felt remorse about it. And so then he went over and told his neighbors what he had done, and asked them to call the police. And so anyway, they came and got him and ended up taking him to prison, or to jail, and then after the trial he was found guilty, and he was sentenced to be executed. And so anyway, he was I don't know what the date of it was, but I think I at some point I went on to a website there, and it kind of told the story of what his offenses were, Texas Department of Corrections, death row, and it kind of told the story about, you know, what had happened, and then it talked about the execution, and it gave the last words of James, and I wanted to read those words. And it was the last words he spoke, and we'll just close this story out with that. Anyway, it says, he said, the statement that I would like to make is, none of this should have happened. And now that I'm dying, there's nothing left to worry about. I know it was a mistake. I have no one to blame but myself. It's no big deal about choosing right from wrong. I pray that everyone involved overlooks the stupidity. Everybody has problems, and I won't be a part of the problem anymore. I can quit worrying now. It was all a mistake. That's all I want to say.